Now, I created a modern day rite of passage. It's something that I share in my Sovereign Brotherhood community that I have online in school. But essentially, it comes down to developing your physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental frame through discipline and discipline self-care, where you start to take care of your personal needs as a high priority. You live in accordance with your values, and you choose a path that will ensure your highest expression, a trajectory where you can build yourself into a man that experiences life in a way that is intentional and that serves his higher purpose and also is in service to the higher good of those people around him.
Nathan, welcome to the Point of Impact. I'm so glad you're here. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation because I got some coaching through Jason Drees, and I'm familiar with you through him. And I'm just a big fan. I think what you've accomplished and what you're teaching and coaching others to do is great. So I'd love to dig into a few things that you've spoken about and you coach uh, others to do. So one of the things that I'm curious about and I want your take on is how today's culture. And it seems as though we are misaligned, confused, uh, as though the culture doesn't know how to deal with each other, and I'm wondering how do we get? Is that just me, or is this something that we need to deal with as on a cultural level?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a growing divide amongst the sexes, amongst masculine and feminine, and I think that we're seeing the real problem. We're seeing a splintering of families. There's a lot of the divorce rates at all-time high. We're seeing more and more single mums. We're seeing more and more erosion of the family unit, and we're seeing population decline. And so I think it's definitely a real challenge. It's definitely something that I think we need to look at, because we're also seeing a fragmentation of society. We're starting to see, you know, when I grew up in a small country town of maybe only a few hundred people. And I remember knowing my neighbors. We used to often, hang out at each other's places, playing with the different kids around the block. And now what I see is increasing isolation. More and more people are connecting on social media, dating on social media, dating through apps and things like that as well, connecting through technology. But I can't say it's bringing us closer. And I think what it's instead doing is creating more and more separation, isolation. Um, and when we don't have the support of community and family, that's also resulting in depression, mental health issues, and stuff like that. So I think it's a genuine problem.
It's an interesting juxtaposition there where, yeah, we're more connected than ever, but we're now more isolated than ever.
Yeah, because I think there's less intimacy, there's less connection, there's more information, but I think there's less association. We end up finding ourselves, even where I am here in Tulum, Mexico, I have to make an endeavor to go out and meet people and socialize. And this is a more social place. It's a small place, and that's part of the reason why I'm here. But the temptation is to get stuck in social media or technology rather than have organic connection. And the way I describe this is increasingly we're connecting through synthetic means as opposed to experiencing true organic connection.
I don't know where the statistics come from, but it almost sounds like there are one in two men are on that OnlyFans, and just I don't one in I don't know how many young women are on there, and that I think it goes back to like the lack of intimacy, the disconnect between masculine and feminine, and on a broader uh, aspect. There's the broader perspective. There's that, I don't know, the polished, the fabricated image of others, the profile brand of people online. It's just complete forgeries. But we get this impression of how we should be acting, and then, of course, that leads to that misunderstanding of what femininity, masculinity really is. Uh, what is the one of the things, you know, heard a lot about, is just like a buzzword, is the toxic masculinity. And for me, I think that's a misnomer. That's like honesty in politics. It just doesn't exist, because you can't be masculine and toxic. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I agree with you. What I point to, I don't believe in, see, this word association, I don't think holds any weight. I think there is traumatized people, there's people with trauma, but to associate toxicity with a generalization like masculinity, I think does a lot more harm than it does good. You could say, oh, there's toxic femininity. I don't believe that there is either. I think there's just people who experience trauma. And I think it's something that unfortunately creates a lot of, it's a catch-all that creates a lot of separation and a lot of disconnection. And I think your little intro there about the fact that, you know, you've got more and more people on OnlyFans, both men and women. For me, this points to the absence of masculinity. So true healthy masculinity is something which brings about, through discipline, order. It brings about the upholding of values and virtues. And in the absence of that, we get devolution, we get a degradation of our culture. And because it's the masculine energy which withholds standards, with which holds through discipline an alignment to behaviors that are nourishing and that are supportive of well-being. So it's discipline. So what we're seeing here, if there's women that are going on OnlyFans, for me that points to a lack of strong masculine leadership in that child's life that would teach that girl what it is that would best support her in her growth and evolution. And equally, the boys that are jumping on there, it's the same story. You know, men that don't have the ability to meet, connect with, lead, court, engage, attract the feminine, I believe it's because they simply haven't been shown how. So what that points to is an absence of strong masculine leadership, or what I call masculine frame. And so what we have is, in families where parents are separated, where the father's excluded, where the father, if they are present, they weren't shown how to, the lessons that they needed to know from their fathers to be strong leaders and to be able to raise their families in a, you know, a strong way. What we get is the gradual destruction or breaking apart of the family unit. So it's actually the presence of healthy masculinity, which I believe is what is most needed for the restoration of family, community, and our society. So toxic masculinity, I believe, is part of a covert agenda to diminish healthy masculinity, to make it not, you know, through association, something that's inherently bad, but it's the absence of masculinity that creates distortion, that creates harm, not the presence of masculinity. The presence of masculinity protects, provides, serves, and leads. It's healthy masculinity that ultimately ensures, you know, like I mentioned before, well-being through the upheaval of standards, through provision, and through care. So what we're seeing is the product of an absence of masculinity, not toxic masculinity.
You've already mentioned standards and erosion of values. Is that a part of building the masculine frame? What does that entail?
So the masculine frame, as I describe it, is where a man begins to become his own authority in life. So he doesn't defer the responsibility for his life to someone else. He takes full responsibility for his life, how he leads it. And it's based on the idea that men are made, that there's no boy that ever came onto this planet as a full grown man. He had to learn the behaviors, the skill set to develop himself into becoming a an extraordinary man who can protect, provide, lead, and serve, as I mentioned before. So the masculine frame is based on two core pillars, and one is to have an internal frame of authority, which means under the direction of our God, he is able to lead his own life and to be the dominant creator in his own reality, to create life and to create, in the fulfillment of his divine purpose, um, you know, have the reason, build himself into the man who can fulfill that. The other aspect of it is to have an internal frame of reference, which basically means he chooses how he responds to the outside world. He doesn't, through seeking approval, validation, or acceptance, give away his ability to respond. So it's linked to the first one, but ultimately it means that he chooses his response. He's not emotionally reactive to the outside world. And he's able to preserve that internal frame of authority and preserve that internal frame of reference with integrity, even under the intensity of some external pressure. And to the degree which he can hold himself in integrity, in whilst being subjected to emotional pressure, whether that's example seduction through OnlyFans, whether that's a woman's emotional, tribulations, whether it's financial pressures, whether it's some sort of physical duress. The more that he can maintain himself in connection with his internal frame of reference and internal authority, the stronger he is as a man. Now, you as being in the military, you'll know that you've been obviously been put in many stressful situations. The more that you can remain calm under pressure, the more that you can meet discomfort and maintain a sense of order and connection to yourself and be the director of your own reality, the more powerful you are and more effective you are as a man.
There's another one of those buzzwords that's going around lately is authenticity, and what I think is getting confused is we were talking about integrity, values, having a strong moral code, and being brave enough to live authentically by those standards. But nowadays, it's been inverted. It's being your true authentic self is being able to show more skin or say more foul language in public or be more outrageous. Actually, the opposite of having strong standards. So, how do we get back in touch with this masculine frame instead of competing with the clickbait out there, which is getting very loud?
What's interesting is what you're describing is a societal frame that most people are conforming to. You're talking about a world where people have lost their sense of truth within themselves, so they fall for any distortion. The more that you have alignment with the divine, the more that you have truth inside of you that you are able to perceive because you live your life in integrity, you live your life in truth, the more that you can see what is the distortion. And again, that points to the masculine principle and masculine frame, that devolution of society, the inversion. And I agree, so much of society is inverted, where we look up to distortions, we look up to people who are causing disconnection, disempowerment, and increasing delusion. And the way home from this is coming back to this organic connection with self. To if the purpose of why we're on this planet is to know yourself, the more that you get entangled into outer world reflections, especially outer world reflections that are designed to distract you and to deviate you from your highest path in life, the more that society devolves, the more that there is a requirement for this masculine order to come back to the realization of self. The realization of self is about ultimately remembering our divine nature. So when we buy into external frames of realities and we don't look within, we make ourselves more susceptible to these delusions, distractions, and the disarray and disorder that comes from it. And of course, like I mentioned before, I believe that there is an intentional subversion to break down the family unit that through social media, through education, schooling, there is a programming designed to dismantle the family unit such that state interests can better control the larger population. Whereas if you have strong men that, as you mentioned, have a high moral code, they will see the devolution of society and they will have the courage to stand for truth. They'll have the courage to bring order back to society. And that's why we need more strong men. We need more men that will say, hey, listen, I see through this BS. I'm here to stand for truth and to bring those, to elevate the people around me, such that the pursuit of this noble virtue becomes increasingly aspirational. At the moment, what you've got is, and I'm all for creating wealth and money, that's great. But if it's done in a way where you increasingly associate outside of yourself instead of inquiring within and finding a deeper awareness of self, then I think that's a distortion and a dead end path. You know, every experience can be something that motivates or is, yeah, that is motivated towards a better understanding of yourself, or it can be something that increasingly leads you away from self.
What of the another contradictory force against men living their, truly authentic, strong masculinity is the instead of being, having that masculinity confused as toxic masculinity, being strong versus being toxic. And then on the flip side of that coin is this uh, toxic femininity or feminism that they can, they don't need to partner with men, that they can do it all on their own, that uh, they have to be as masculine as they are feminine. uh, whatever you notice about that, how do men react to that, or is this just something they have to live around, um, to deal with?
Yeah, well, this points to the inversion and the intentional confusion of what genders are. You know, a man's, a woman's a woman. But now we have, dozens of different apparent genders. All that serves to do is create confusion. And the more confusion you have about polarity, about the clear line of polarity, the more that, as you mentioned, people can buy into distortion, um, and deviations from truth. So when you start to say, well, a man's not a man or a man can get pregnant, we're in a pretty obscene level of distortion. You know, genetics, XY chromosomes, XX chromosomes tell us that there's a clear delineation, right? And the exception is not the rule. Yet society is trying to make rare marginal, indicators as something that's the norm, which is not reality. And I think again, the way home is to make, and this is part of the reason why I do what I do, is to show that masculinity and femininity is something that's really beautiful. It's something that through education, when men are taught how to become men again and women are taught how to become women, which is what used to happen when children were raised in the proximity of elders, of both their parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles, and we lived in tribes, this information will be shared and passed to each other. When you're living in a reality where the majority of your input, if your education comes from, your technology, and especially technology where there's, a lot of distortions, then what we do is we end up increasingly further away from ourselves. We forget who we are. And the way home is that what we pointed to before is the courage for someone to say, hey, this is weird, this is strange. The way that I'm approaching that is to create both, men's communities, men's circles, and ultimately a sovereign community where we will be raising our own children with that noble virtues. We'll be raising our children with a clear delineation of what a man and a woman is in terms of polarity. You know, polarity is something that's precious and beautiful. We have night and day, we have men and women, we have light and dark. And through that polarity, creation happens. When there's a dissolution of polarity, meaning we no longer know what men and women are, we don't know what night and day is, we don't know what light and dark is, what do we exist in? It's a gray or it's a dusk. There's no there's no contrast and there's no polarity. And polarity is also the foundation of why we end up having children, because men are men and women are women. And what we're noticing is these declining birth rates and the like as well. And it's because we've forgotten who we are. And so when you don't have a clear identity of self, you're very impressionable by the outer world reality and you succumb to it. And so part of strong leadership is not to have control over people, it's to lead people back to themselves, back to greater self-awareness, back to a deeper felt sense of truth. See, truth cuts through distortions and illusions. So what I believe is it's actually we're in a spiritual war of one which leads people away from themselves through distortion and delusion, and one that brings people back to themselves. And I believe the way that you can best come back to self is to bring back the family unit, to raise kids in a healthy way again, as opposed to handing that over to social media or government interests or schools or educational systems that increasingly teach from inversion and distortion.
Do you think this distortion, this disconnect, this great confusion is cyclic? Do you think this is a
That's an
generational?
interesting thought. Well, I believe it comes from a Marxist socialism. I believe it's an agenda to bring down a nation. It's an agenda to take power away from people and put it in the hands of government. Uh, is it cyclical? Yeah, because typically empires fall, and perhaps when the empires fall, there in the past may have been a restoration of family out of necessity. We start to come together with the people that you can best rely upon and trust. And if the government's not providing anything and is not present, then maybe increasingly there's a restoration of family out of necessity. I do think that there is cyclical, um, you know, direction of society in a larger macro, but I do believe that we're in some sort of new territory at the same time. I don't know that we've ever been so distorted. I know there's been variants of it, through different times in the falls of empire, like Rome and what have you, in different empires before. But I think that there is really something quite profound in the point of time that we're at in humanity, in this spiritual evolution. On the one side, there's a lot of awakening that's happening. There's a lot of people that are starting to wake up in different various, both spiritually and mentally, I guess you'd say. But also, there's a lot of distortion as well. And so, I think we're at a very just interesting time in humanity, where there's increasing disorder, disarray, and chaos reflected with the lack of masculine presence and energy. But I think out of crisis is also opportunity. And I believe that there can be a great awakening. So I think that's why some of us, if we believe in the idea of incarnation, are here right now, is to restore humanity back to something that's beautiful, to remember the gift of humanity.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, UODFudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family-owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate-loving patriots just like you. Go to EODFudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick-Me-Up, an all-American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So right now, go over to eodfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's eodfudge.com. eodfudge.com. And now, back to the show. Well, I'm thinking back to like the Dark Ages and the Crusades, Inquisitions, and then the Enlightenment, and stepping away from the church, and then we have these cycles where we have strong foundations, or we almost puritanical, and we could lean too far one direction, and then we resist against that, and we go too far the other direction. And I'm just that was the root of that question. There is, are we rebelling against something? Because remember in recent decades where we were too conservative or too religious, and now we're going way beyond just freedom and liberalism, and uh, yeah, maybe a lack of shame.
Well, I think shame's interesting. There is such a thing as a healthy level of shame, but that's far outside of the scope of what most people experience. Shame is essentially the internalization of guilt, where you identify as there being something wrong with you. So instead of a bad act, which would you feel bad about something you did, which would be guilt, you feel bad about the person you are, is shame. And I think so much of society is built upon shame. And I think that a lot of it's hidden, and that's why it rules over so many people. And so whatever is repressed gets expressed in unhealthy ways, which is what we're seeing in society right now. Now, regarding the pendulum swing from one side to the other, I agree that there's definitely something of that nature happening. Like you're seeing the red pill movement now of men that have like, we're done with being disrespected, but they've lost potentially touch with the true value of the feminine, and appreciation the gift that the feminine can bring to family and life. But again, there's always I think a natural tendency towards equilibrium in some capacity. I think that's somehow hardwired into existence. Is there's some sort of restoration over time towards equilibrium and balance and harmony. And I think where we are now is in a place of mass distortion, as we said, but I think you can have swings of equilibrium. The way that I prefer to talk is in terms of alignment and coherence. So alignment, you could say, with truth, alignment with divine will, that's alignment. And the extent to which you're aligned and you express and behave in a way that is aligned, that's your level of coherence. So I think what we're having is a society that's largely expressing itself in disharmony, which is incoherence, and out of alignment with truth. So however we arrive back, sometimes the path back to alignment and coherence can be through quite a strong pendulum swing. Now, you know, I know that I've read, your webpage, and we may have had in our own different ways, different stories where we've had a strong pendulum swing, some dramatic event that has happened in our life that has brought us back to a deeper truth, a more aligned path than with the one we're on. And that could have been quite an extreme pendulum swing that brought us back into alignment. So for me, the pendulum swing isn't so much as much of an issue. It's like whatever's going to be needed. The more out of alignment you are, the greater the swing back to the center, essentially. And maybe there's a correcting force where you go past the center a little bit. But again, if it's the most important aspect is how do we come back into alignment and coherence? And I think there is going to be a significant correction. And there's that saying that, strong times create strong men create easy times create weak men create hard times create strong men. And that's that pendulum swing that you experience between the polarities of maybe what times are easy and hard. And I think we're going increasingly into that correction of harder times where healthy masculinity will come back as something that becomes increasingly prized, increasingly valued to bring order in the relative chaos that I think much of the world's beginning to look like it's heading towards.
Do you think we'll be swinging much further in that direction, or do you think we're coming back? Where do you think we are in that
I
cycle
think we're going
and
further.
swing? We're coming back to center?
No, I think we'll go further before we come back. We're maybe at towards the end of the swing, but I mean, we're basically living in an inverted reality already. So I don't know how much further we can swing.
I
But I what I think it will be is that we're in that pre-crisis moment. There's about to have a massive crisis event, which is that full crisis you could call the complete chaos. And I believe we're going towards that. So whether that comes in the form of financial corrections, whether it comes in the form of some sort of global conflict, this reorder, new order, whatever it might be, there's going to be significant chaos that's going to come. And then it's more about, well, how do we relate in those times to create alignment and coherence? And whether it conforms to what we want as a society, ones which, that one which restores organic connection and an organic reality of and ways of relating and a healthy, noble virtues and morality, or do we conform or reorganize in a way that's even more distorted? And I don't know that that can happen. I think there's going to be a restoration, and I think there's going to be an awakening, a wake up moment where people realize how much of a distortion they're in, or they will choose a level of such incoherence and distortion that it won't be comfortable anymore. Maybe they'll choose to exit this physical plane, or the intensity of the correction would be painful increasingly for them. But I do believe that we're in an awakening that will see a lot of people in a healthy way come back to that stable center and the equilibrium balance. And I do believe the crisis will present the opportunity for a restoration of family, of healthy masculinity, and ultimately society. It'll just there might just be people who have splintered off that are choosing to hold on to the distorted path, you could say.
You mentioned truth, and I think it was 12 years ago. I heard one man talking to another man saying, "There's your truth, there's my truth, and but there's no the truth." And I thought, what the hell does that mean? But then over the course of the last decade or so, I figured out what the hell they were talking about. And it just got more ridiculous after that. Because there is objective truth. There's what you believe and what I believe, but the truth is the truth. And I think that's touching back on that, uh, having a reliable foundation, right? You talk about with masculinity that and having a set of standards, a set of rules that we can all live by. We can all say, yes, I believe that's true. That's correct. And there are two genders. That's yeah, ridiculous to think otherwise. In fact, to encourage otherwise is counterintuitive, to be polite. So I'm just wondering how far back the pendulum is going to swing once we hit that chaos moment.
Mm. Well, I think I've got something to say on truth. For me, truth's a frequency because we can all feel when there's truth cuts through distortion and illusion. So for me, truth is a frequency that represents alignment and coherence. That's what truth is. When you're living in truth, you're living in alignment and coherence. And you could say that with living in alignment and coherence with divine expression. That's what truth is. It's something that's beautiful. It's something that has a quality to it that like is resonant. People feel, connect with. It's truth. Now, there's perceptions. There's ideas that can differ. There's different angles people see things from. But I think truth is unified, whereas something that's a lie or not truth is something that creates a separation from alignment and coherence. How far the pendulum will swing, I ultimately think we're in some sort of learning matrix, program, reality to know ourselves. The ultimate thing is to know ourselves. Why we're here is to understand our true nature, our divine nature. And I think some people will, through this period, experience that as a catalyst to really come back into alignment and truth, to really know themselves, to really understand that they have the ultimate power of influence in their reality. And there'll be other people that are very much externally referenced that'll get sucked into the chaos, the disarray, the order. And I think it'll swing a lot further for them. Whereas I feel those who are able to self-regulate, who have a connection with the divine, who are living currently in a place of courageous expression and honoring of truth, they will thrive through this period. Because again, I believe that our environment seeks equilibrium. It seeks balance. It seeks harmony in some capacity. So where there's an equal action, another way to say it, if there's one action, there's an equal opposite reaction. So if a lot of people are falling into chaos and disarray, there's going to be people, even if in a smaller minority, that will be experiencing quite profound positive shifts in their reality, relative. And so what you'll see is this almost occupying of two different realities. Those who are living inside an environment that's very chaotic and disarray and difficult, and those that might experience something much more profound in a positive way, of their ability to create their realities. I don't think the universal laws ever stop working. So if you even if there's chaos or not chaos, I don't believe that you ever stop being able to influence your reality. Once you understand the laws of the universe, I think they always apply. And so for me, some of us, I think, have gone through these trials and tribulations and choosing a courageous path of truth and alignment and, in honoring of God and divine will. And I believe that this path is preparing us for these moments of chaos, because many of us have gone through this difficult path, have had a lot of things taken from us, almost been stripped back, have had to live in extreme uncertainty or ambiguity. And it's in that we found our strength, courage, and many of us found God. It was in times of, extreme, extreme circumstances of confusion, dissolution, that we found ourselves in. And then somehow we discovered more of ourselves in that process through those trials. So for me, it's a matter of the people that this period of intensity, you could say, of chaos, it's a catalyst and an invitation. And the extent to which we can see it as such depends on how much we reap and we benefit from this experience in understanding and knowing our true nature.
How can a man who wants to be masculine, wants to be strong, how can he create more order out of the chaos, or prepare better for the society we're in today or tomorrow's? How can he do it? What's the daily practice, daily ritual, or uh, what can he do?
Well, I think first he needs to not be a victim, and he needs to take full responsibility for his reality. That even the most difficult things that have happened to his life, that he's some way has a capacity to respond, and in some way, whether it's subconsciously created that reality, perhaps by his not knowing something about himself or the way life works. So once he takes full responsibility for his reality, then he can commit to changing that reality. When a man commits to creating, and usually this is out of discomfort and pain, and he instead, especially if he gets a mentor, like this is essentially the hero's journey, is when a man is ready to grow in his consciousness, is ready to grow in self-realization, he typically embarks on a quest, a rite of passage. And this can be conscious or can be unconscious and involuntary, or it could be voluntary where he chooses to embark on this passage, or more common, he starts the rite of passage after an involuntary catalyst that sends him on that trajectory. So for me, that was my mother's passing. And with that started a catalyst for me to get into men's work. Now, I had never really understood, or I'd read plenty of books on self-development, but I didn't realize there was something beyond. Hang a minute, I didn't realize there was something beyond the physical reality until I started to meditate. I started to experience, like being exposed to people who had certain abilities, energetic abilities, metaphysical abilities, shamanic traditions, plant medicines. And I began to see something beyond the physical. And I understand, I lent into what is sometimes referred as the mystery, which is the parts of ourselves that we're unaware of, that we sometimes hide, repress, and deny. And so the way home, the way towards this path of order in chaos and self-realization to have a greater sense of strength in self and your identity is ultimately to go on a rite of passage. Now, I created a modern day rite of passage. It's something that I share in my Sovereign Brotherhood community that I have online in school. But essentially, it comes down to developing your physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental frame through discipline and disciplined self-care, where you start to take care of your personal needs as a high priority. You live in accordance with your values, and you choose a path that will ensure your highest expression, a trajectory where you can build yourself into a man that experiences life in a way that is intentional and that serves his higher purpose and also is in service to the higher good of those people around him. So he essentially commits to becoming a better man. He starts essentially, then he holds himself to that path with discipline. He often finds a mentor or a man that's already a bit further down the path, and he is supported through the trials, the lessons, and he's able to be guided back towards himself through a series of initiations. And that's ultimately what I think needs to be restored is men's work. It's another reason why I do what I do, because it's played such a significant role in my life when I was confused and lost. Um, it it helped me relieve a lot of trauma and stress and give me a greater clarity um, in you know, my reason for being on this planet and where I was heading.
Yeah, it seems like we could all use a little less stress, a little more clarity. And what you're saying there is put your oxygen mask on first before you try putting others. Uh, do the work to build that masculine frame, and then you'll be you're a greater asset to society, culture, your family, all of that.
Now, I don't think that most men really appreciate how much better their life could be when they start to have a disciplined and intentional approach to their evolution and growth as a man. And it comes back to the point that men are made. If you're leaving your personal growth to chance, then you're going to often remain stuck at a certain level along the path of continuously learning the same lesson over and over again. So if you find things repeating in your life, especially painful events that are repeating in your life, often it's a sign that you're at a gate, a milestone, a decision point where you need to discover something new about new about yourself, a new resource, make a new decision, choose a new direction, a new path. And if you don't, then it can be incredibly discouraging to feel as if you're at an impasse and running into the same problem again and again, whether it's with women, whether it's financially, whether it's with your health. And what it means is that you haven't really learnt the lesson of the current uh, challenge. And all challenges are catalysts for change, in my belief, at least. So yeah, it my recommendation would be that if any man is at a point of overwhelm, is at a point of crisis in his life, that crisis represents opportunity. And with a new perspective, a new decision, a new awareness, you might find that you shift from one identity to another, a more empowering identity. Some people believe that their identity is just something they're given and that's it. They go through life with that identity. Well, I don't believe is at all close to the truth. I am 1000% and have experienced myself. You can shift your identity. You can build yourself into someone who experiences life very differently. It typically requires a great amount of commitment, and it typically requires influence of people who have wisdom, who have earned this through their own healing journey, and to share that with you as well. So I think that we need to restore communities and rites of passage, but again, move outside of, even on the men's movement, consuming all this content from social media, and start getting into organic connection, start going through rites of passages and initiations that in a healthy way bring us back to ourselves, and stop placing external people as authorities, and stop having external sources of people deciding our self-worth, our value, and attempting to gain some sort of acceptance of value from anyone external. I think that we need to come back to ourselves and remember the beautiful nature of our true essence. Well, I think that's
Hmm.
what's needed.
I say all the time, pain is loaded with information so long as we're willing to learn and you listen and learn. And frankly, I look forward to a little crisis now and then. It means a sale in the stock market. But also, like you said, opportunity. There's opportunity to grow, to get stronger, uh, to rise to a challenge. So you're absolutely right.